what happened in the AUKUS kind of things. Just because Australia bought from one place, they actually had to cancel the damn order. And the US then said, no, you buy it from me, don't buy it from anybody else. So geopolitics also plays a huge role in terms of, at least in terms of defense exports. Now, look at Quad, for example. All these countries, we are the manufacturing base. So it will add on to the opportunity to export, at least on the Quad count. So I think in terms of defense, we are very well placed. In terms of agri, you mentioned agri. I think Ravi also mentioned agri. There, about 135,000 outlay which has been made in the budget. Of course, sadly, a lot of it, apart from what is made for the subsidies, that's kind of a waste of a good 32 lakh chunk of the 32 lakh crores. But a huge amount of investment, or rather revenue side expenditure, has been allocated towards the agri-food and agri-tech sector, and the government is already determined towards that, and a lot is happening. And I know that in the past the ministry was fairly aggressive. Even on textile, I completely agree. There is a lot of export competitiveness that can happen in the textile space, especially in these smart apparel, intelligent apparel kind of domain at this point of time. Of course, the Pakistan and Bangladesh, half of that is towards the haberdashery or the curtains and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of value addition apparel is happening right now in Japan, in Taiwan, in India, even in the US. And I think there's a big opportunity to apparel, big opportunity. It will happen. Food, big opportunity. It will happen. Defense, I think we are well placed geopolitically, so there's a lot of opportunity over there that will happen. And then you will have to then depend on the inherent ability of us SMEs to kind of rule the world when it comes to export competitive. When the entire psyche is very positive, when the entire ecosystem is very healthy, then I think the individual entrepreneur takes it and runs with him. And I think you can't challenge the Indian entrepreneur on that count, at least. So overall, I think export competitiveness, we're going to see very high. It just helps that we have such a huge domestic demand that kind of gives him a cushion to operate. And then
fair enough.
Yeah,
that's a fair point. Now, Srini, this will be the last part of our conversation, and let's talk about numbers a little. The proposed fiscal deficit target of 6.4% of GDP and the divestment targets which the government has set for this year. Do you think after the Air India experience, the government has got a little realistic on the divestment numbers and the fiscal deficit numbers?
Whatever one says, I think it cuts both ways, right? If I were to use a colloquial language instead of air, you say hawa. You can toss any number in the hawa. But I think I am glad that they've not thrown a large number, which is unbelievable. If this is a number which I would rather promise something and overachieve, which is fine. And for all the, let's say, yesterday we've seen a huge amount of cynicism saying that, does it mean LIC won't go through? Not really. Even if LIC were to go through, and it also speaks very well about the entire process, right? You can hope to time the process, but this is your family jewel. You have to get it right. You have to have the ability to steer it and not a gun held to you saying that you must divest within March. Let's say if the markets are buoyant and you can get it done, then great. Markets are not. For all the critics who talk about independence of the regulator versus the market, regulator is fine, but markets are independent. So you cannot be held accountable if you had to delay it by a month and get a better valuation. So if I were a treasurer, this is what I would do. So in that, I think they've been very, very prudent. And I think it is also, if you look at it, balancing the budget, it also shows that they're not dependent only on those divestment targets. It means that if they achieve more, the fiscal deficit falls far, far steeper. And it is also what I think we've all been talking about, that we must achieve it as the roadmap was given, right? The entire concept that we've been, let's say, some of this criticism has been, why is it that we keep tampering with some of those numbers? And I don't think we're going to tamper with some of those numbers, because very, very clearly you have a council which is the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. So we have a roadmap for that. But for COVID, I think we would have come there. I
Sure.
think I'm very happy that the numbers are lower than what everybody is claiming it to be.
Numbers are lower. Dakshita ji, we were talking about fiscal prudence. We ended our last discussion with fiscal prudence. Firstly, do you think that the divestment numbers are far more practical than last year or maybe the year before?
Most certainly, Srinath has said it all, because the embedded value of LIC yesterday, if we heard the press conference, the embedded value of LIC is yet to emerge. But so we are walking a path where we are working on a ultra rational, or we can say slightly on the conservative side number. But having said that, I'd like to point out one thing, that a budget is an annual budget is a continuous exercise of recasting of numbers. And the parliament and the law of the land permits you to recast your numbers. You can take a supplementary. And as we noticed this year in December in the winter session, there was a very huge supplementary taken to cater for mid-year interest, to factor in many changes. So a budget is not a static thing that whatever has been presented, say yesterday, becomes something which you have to, you can moderate, you can amend, because many, I mean, you can't predict decisions. Decisions are variable. I mean, like nobody predicted COVID or the third wave, and that things would have been very different. So yes, I mean, you work on a baseline number, and here with this number, you can only go up perhaps. So
Sure. Prabal, do you think government is becoming better at targeting sales numbers and in fact selling after their India experience?
So I would just step back a little bit and comment on this. You see, there were three definitive things which Nirmala ji did last year in the last year's budget, which is the economic to change the economic trajectory of India actually. So one of them, after the three, one of them was the departure she made basically in cleaning up the books and showing the financials for what they are, right? Which has been since 2011, I think Chidambaram started it, and then it got continued by every finance minister. So the financials are unbelievable in many ways, the off-balance sheet financing and stuff like that. Now, this departure she made last year on the road to building credibility of the financial statements is paramount, I think, in getting confidence back in India, right? So to that extent, under-promising and over-delivering, as Srinath said, is the mantra to go. And to that extent, I'm very, very sure that there are two cushions. A good CFO always keeps cushions in the budget, right? In any budget. I've done that for my whole life. And she has kept two cushions. The two cushions are, one is divestment. 65,000 crores is obviously a very realistic number, but it will be overachieved. Hopefully, if things go on track. And the second is tax revenues of 17 lakh crores. These are two cushions she has kept in the budget, and very wisely, because there are three imponderables in the world today, which can affect us globally, apart from mess-ups which can create ourselves. But external shocks, there are three of them. One is, of course, commodity prices. The budget is at $75 a barrel for oil. Today, the oil is at 90. Okay. Now, what if oil goes to 100? There'll have to be excise cuts, for example, right? So who's going to fund that? So therefore, the tax revenues cushion is very much necessary. So oil is one. The second is withdrawal of liquidity by the Fed, and the pace. The pace is more important. I think that. And third is this issue of COVID is still lingering on, right? I mean, nobody knows if there'll be a fourth wave or not, and how it. So all these three things put together are global shocks, which we don't have control on. So I think she's done the right thing by, doing what she has done in keeping these hedges in the thing.
Mr. Ravi, closing remarks from you, divestment targets.
So Dakshita mentioned very clearly about LIC. Let's take that as an example. So what happens, there's a huge process, and then this period of COVID, last two waves, and you don't get investments very easily for this because you won't get the optimum value which you are desiring. So what happens is this process of disinvestment is a period of 2 to 3 years. Let me, even if you plan it out. For example, let us take Air India. What was announced in the Atmanirbhar scheme about only 2 public sector companies being in the same space or same, that will also happen. It's just a matter of time. And also, it is also very imperative to, and it's also important to note that government is already collecting all the details of unproductive assets from all the PSUs. So the unproductive assets are a big challenge. So for example, all these big PSUs own a lot of land and properties, which are not being used at all. So I think it's not about only disinvestment of the core sector, but it's also about getting value for all this. So it's a process, and these process have to be, there has to be a mechanism of market discovery, and which is not a very easy process. So my take on all this is that it is not going to be, you can't fix 1 year to do all this. It's a process. There will be spillover, there will be an extension there, but finally they have to, what they have promised, they have to sort of deliver, but it will be in a span of maybe 2 years, 3 years. I see this year there will be an attempt to actually take out a lot of PSUs or merge them or make 2 PSUs in the same space, so that the unwanted, non-productive and non-operative PSUs are taken out of the from the government. That's what I feel.
Sure. It's a process. Vikramji.
No, so you linked fiscal deficit and disinvestment. Let's look at, see, in the fiscal deficit of that 17 odd lakh crores, some 9.5 lakh crores is interest payout.
Correct.
Okay, which probably can be negotiated, and that leaves you with the other 6 or 7 lakhs. That's the kind of number that needs, that's the kind of a bridge factor that we're talking about. And yes, that, see, what happens is that money, that money will be required from various places. You can have, treasury borrowings and all those kind of things also coming in. You'll have internal revenues that will be generated towards that amount. Disinvestment is, by the way, just one small point. At the end of the day, it's...
Do you think they're realistic with your numbers?
Yeah, I think they're more than realistic. But, there are reverses happening where the government has to put money in Idea and Vodafone to, kind of bail them out also. The reverse, so that is investment on the government side. So yes, disinvestment, all the targets are absolutely realistic. I think there should not be this force on the government, okay, disinvest. It's privatization, let's call it privatization, and let them do it at a decent pace, get a decent value out of it, and that's what is going to benefit. Unnecessary, just pressurizing it is going to take it away. Quite honestly, the load on the fiscal deficit is not going to reduce because of disinvestment. That's a completely different thing. That was the point I was trying to make. So, completely, the numbers are absolutely in line. There'll be better numbers, only you have to give them time. I mean, it's anybody operating the stock market will know. I mean, you cannot time it, but as best as possible. Let's not at least devalue it, that's why.
Sure. Thank you, everybody, for setting the tone right and really crossed the limit. And thank you for setting the tone of the day right as far as economy and all the sectors are concerned. Srinath, Sridharan, Mr. SRavi, Vikram, Limsay, Dakshita Das ji, Prabal, thank you so much for your time and taking out time and talking to us. Thank you so much. Thank you.